Barry Michael Aldridge is a multi-award winning, art school trained, Chartered Institute of Marketing qualified designer, fellow member, and fully chartered marketeer. In this video podcast series, Train of Thought, Barry takes a deep dive into the subject of digital disruption.
Okay, I am absolutely delighted to be joined today by Ismini Vasileiou from the East Midlands Cyber Security Cluster. Ismini, please introduce yourself and give a background of your work.
Thank you. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you for the invite. My day job, I'm an associate professor at Moffat University, and I'm also the founding director for this Midlands Cybersecurity Cluster. And my work sits across academia, industry, and policy, which means I spent a lot of time translating between very different worlds. On one side, you have the technical research and education, and on the other, you've got the business trying to survive in a very competitive market these days. And of course, on the other hand, you've got the government trying to design policy that works in practice. So I've been working in cybersecurity and digital education for nearly 2 decades now. And I studied very much in the academic and technical space, teaching, research, system security models. But of course, over time, I became increasingly interested in what actually happens in organizations. And I realized that many cyber incidents don't happen because people are careless. They happen because organizations are under pressure or under-resourced and trying to do too many things at once. And over the past few years, I've led several government-focused and regional programs that focus around cyber resilience, the skills development, but most importantly, the organizational capability. And of course, I've been working with hundreds of SMEs, the public sector bodies, and educators. And I find it extremely motivating that I can help organizations to move away from what is being seen as cyber, something quite scary or technical, and instead to see it as part of good leadership and good management.
Yes, excellent, thank you. And in terms of the East Midlands Cybersecurity Cluster, can you tell me more about that and the services that it provides?
Sure. So it was created, EMCSC was created because we recognized that cyber resilience couldn't be delivered in isolation, because you can't just train people and hope that someday it's going to work. You can't just give businesses software and hope it will solve everything. You need that coordination piece, really. So the cluster is trying to bring together the universities, the industry, public sector organizations, the local authorities, but also the national stakeholders as well. And we act as a convener, a connector, and a trusted advisor. So in practical terms, what that means is that we can run training programs, workshops, awareness sessions, leadership briefings, but also some technical clinics if we need to as well. And the maturity assessments, we can support the businesses on how to do them and how they need to tailor them to their own needs. But what is very important about clusters like ours is how we build those relationships and how we help, for example, a small manufacturer to connect with a university researcher. How can we help a charity to find trusted security advice? And how can we help the councils, for example, because we've seen cyber attacks on the councils as well, with emerging risks. We represent the region nationally, and we feed local challenges into the government strategy directly in those discussions to help shape the policy. So we're not just delivering projects, we're building a regional ecosystem.
Yeah, brilliant, good stuff. And again, in terms of yourself, you've gone into the background as to how you got into cybersecurity and the why. And that was quite niche, wasn't it? I think you were ahead of the curve there, because if you're saying sort of 20 odd years ago, you really were pioneering at that point, weren't you? And to get into this exciting subject, which has become what it's become and is so relevant and topical. So it must be a rewarding job for you.
In a way it is, but it's amazing how we feel there's still a lot to do, and how technologies are advancing, and how we see investment in different technologies like AI these days, and how there's a tendency that now cyber resilience becomes secondary, and organizations will focus more on the technology rather than realizing that I first need to be secure and then decide which technology I want to invest. So it's fascinating doing this for so many years. And of course, 10 years ago, the focus was a lot around the technical aspects, but the human factors, the human elements of an organization, that's what we're trying to focus more these days.
Certainly. Yes, certainly. And as this interview goes on, that is going to come up time and again, I'm sure. So I've got a few icebreaker questions here for you, just before we get into the depth of the interview. And firstly, what does digital disruption mean to you?
Well, it's something that is it has become embedded in everyday life. As I said, 20 years ago, if your IT system goes, it would go down. It was just an inconvenience. But today, what we've seen when an IT system goes down, it stops the business overnight. And we've seen this even with the airport incidents lately. Yeah. So we've got cloud systems, online payments, remote working, the digital supply chains are now quite an essential infrastructure. So that means the pace of change is relentless, and organizations are kind of constantly adopting new tools, platforms, systems, all that, just to stay competitive. But the resilience piece, again, often lags behind. So I see many organizations that can be digitally advanced, but organizationally fragile. And that's when they've adopted technology without investing in governance, the skills, or the security aspect of things. So disruption can create opportunity, but it also creates hidden risks. And the challenge is how can we learn to innovate responsibly? Brilliant.
That's fantastic. Yeah, definitely. And I agree totally that disruption can be a positive and a negative. And in fact, you've led me on to my second icebreaker for you here. So when you think about innovation, what comes to mind?
Well, so it's an excellent question, and very often it's a question we even have with our students when they do a PhD or a thesis. What is your contribution to knowledge? What is innovation today? And I think it is quite misunderstood in recent years. It's often presented as something glamorous, like AI and blockchain or automation. But I think the most valued, the most valuable innovation is often about the process, the culture, and the people. And it's about how you redesign how decisions are made, basically, and how can you improve how risks are assessed? How do you create those feedback loops within your organization and beyond your organization, within the supply chain? And if I take it down into cybersecurity, I would say that some of the best innovation I have seen in organizations is learning to talk openly about mistakes, shaping lessons learned, and how you build those learning cultures, really. And I think that's far more powerful than just creating or buying the latest tool. And that's how we can be sustainable, ethical, and of course, more people-centered as well.
Yeah, brilliant. And I do find as well, innovation as a word gets bounded about an awful lot, doesn't it? Everyone wants innovation. Everyone wants to be innovative. But do they ever really stop and think, what do you mean by that? That's like saying I want to be on the first page of Google, but what for? And I totally agree with things that, when you look at technology and innovating within that space, it's got to have a reason, hasn't it? It's got to have purpose. It's got to have a value added. Otherwise, there's not much point doing it, is it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And my third kind of icebreaker question to you, and this is something that I feel passionate about, and it's EDI, equality, diversity, and inclusion. How important is that to you personally, and why?
Well, as a woman in a very male-dominated environment is extremely important as well, and it matters to me, like both professionally but also personally as well. Over the years of my career, having worked in so many different environments and organizations as well, I've seen incredibly talented people often that can be excluded from a tech career because they didn't follow traditional routes. They might not have gone to certain universities. They might be neurodiverse. They might have caring responsibilities, or they might come from underrepresented backgrounds. So the sector loses out when that happens, really. I mean, diversity brings different ways of thinking, and we've got to acknowledge that. We need to see that different skill set that people have. It brings a different risk perceptions because you see things very differently. But it also brings creativity as well. Again, when you see things differently, you create differently. In my work, I do try to widen access, challenge stereotypes, support alternative pathways into the profession. And inclusion is not about lowering the standards. It's about how do you remove unnecessary barriers. That's what we need to start focusing on and taking forward.
Yeah, perfect. That just speaks a lot of what I believe and think myself. I do believe that diverse teams are really important because you get all those different perspectives, and certainly there's a big drive for more women in tech, and being neurodiverse as well, especially in tech. So I'm neurodivergent, and I think isn't that a value added for
Absolutely.
tech industry or any
Absolutely.
industry, because you've got that, you can see problems that maybe pragmatic thinkers may not see, and you can approach it from that different angle. So yeah, and there's so many stats to say, isn't there, that diverse teams are more productive, they're more creative, they're more innovative, and and ultimately more successful and even profitable if you're a profit-driven organization. So there's and it's twofold. I agree, it's brilliant for the world of work, but also for society as well. So it's a massive subject.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. So let's go into this now. Let's go into the main bit of the interview. And this is quite text heavy here, so I'm going to read out some stuff to you. So 2025 saw several high-profile cyber attacks across the UK, and last year the government released a strategic defence review, and I read it, and some of these words, they're quite lengthy paragraphs here, but within it there were things that said this: for the first time in many years, we must actively prepare for the possibility of the UK homeland coming under direct threat, potentially in a wartime scenario. This demands a whole of society approach to national resilience. The second paragraph said, technology is changing how war is fought, making it easier for adversaries to project harm from a distance via cyber means, so effectively another country. So those are quite chilling words there, Ismini, aren't they? And I guess my question to you is, how do you interpret that message or that messaging? Particularly, what does a wartime scenario look like in a cyber context? And how do we even begin to adopt a whole of society approach to national resilience? So that's a hefty question for you.
Yeah.
There, isn't it?
I think I would start by saying it's already happening, and we might not be seeing it in our everyday lives. When I get on the bus to go to work, when I pick up the kids from school, when I go for a coffee with my friends or night out. But it is happening, and more fascinating, and what is really capturing my imagination, I would say, but also where I'm considering taking my work on is exactly what's happening out in the outer space and the cyber war in that field. So I would say that the statements you just read reflect a kind of recognition that cyber is now strategic infrastructure, basically. And in modern conflict, you don't just attack armies, you attack the trust, you attack the services and the confidence as well. So cyber attacks, we've seen they can disrupt healthcare, the utilities, transport, food supply. We saw what happened during the summer with Co-op. And they can spread that misinformation and panic. So a whole of society approach means resilience is everyone's responsibility. And that means that it includes those digital skills in schools. So it needs to start from a very young age, the leadership training, the public awareness, what we download on our phones, which websites we log in, how the apps are tracking our information. We need some strong institutions, possibly some policies, some frameworks, and of course, those trusted communication as well. So resilience is as social as much as is technical. But the reality is that it is happening. And although we might not see it that easily, the more aware we become about it, the more we can do as a society to protect ourselves and the country as well.
Perfect. Yeah, and I agree with you on all of that. Case in point with that, 10 years ago, I was reading the book, and I'm hopefully going to interview this guy as well, and it was Industries of the Future by Alec Ross. And it made me realise when I was reading about IoT, the Internet of Things, and connectivity and weaponization of code and cyber attacks, I was very much aware at that time that this was going to happen. This was a thing. And I could see it. I could see what I call digital naivety, I think. So I took this book to then marketing team, and they didn't understand why I was talking about this stuff. And I think where we've got to over the 10 years is that back then, things like cybercrime would have been something that belonged to the IT department. Whereas we're in a situation now where it's all of our responsibility. And, it's not just confined to somebody sitting in a room with a big server anymore. We've all got a responsibility and duty of care, which in itself opens up a can of worms, because how on earth do you train up a society to be cyber savvy, And I think as we go in further, we'll uncover this stuff a lot more. So let's go on, and thank you there for breaking down quite a complicated couple of paragraphs and making sense of that. I think people could read it and be a bit scared by it, but it's there's a lot going on in the world at the minute. So really, Ismini, to set the scene here, what I would like to hear from you, what are the main forms of cyber attacks? How do they typically work? And why is it that people and businesses so often fall for them?
I think if we really look at the recent examples, let's not go back 5 years, let's go back 2-3 years. The most common attacks remain remarkably consistent. So we've got phishing, we've got ransomware, we've got credential theft, and any supply chain attacks as well. But what changes is the quality of them. So the messages are becoming more personalized. The scams are becoming more convincing, and the attacks are more automated. Again, going back to that AI investment that we see and the growth of that technology. So they work not because they try to exploit the technical aspects of a business. They try to exploit the human psychology. So the trust, the authority, the urgency. Someone is going to call you and say, I've been locked out of the system. I really need to get into the password. And of course, the fear as well, depending where you are in the hierarchy, you might believe who has made that phone call and what the kind of information they're trying to get from you. So what I would really like to say, and I always say, because they always say to me, doing cybersecurity must be so clever. No, so people are not stupid. Nobody is stupid. We're just busy. We're very busy. We're multitasking. We're doing this podcast today, but the phone could go off at some point because the school is calling, or anything can happen. So cyber attackers really understand that, and that's why they try to manipulate, and that's why we see that rising number of cyber attacks we are facing these days. But they are consistent. It's exactly the same issue again and again and again.
Yeah, perfect. And actually, when you look at phishing and stuff like that, that's not really a new method of attack, is it? That's been around for a long time. And I totally agree that feeds into human psychology, because there's one basically where you'll get an email from a managing director saying, I need this urgently. Well, your instant fear factor there is your psychology is I've got to reply to that straight away, but actually it's not the managing director, is it? So yeah, I agree. It's not so much about the technical, it's about the psychological impact it has. Yeah, brilliant stuff. So just looking at last year, looking at M&S, Harrods and the Cooperative, they suffered significant cyber attacks, didn't they? And looking specifically at those that made big news, what could those organisations have done differently to reduce their vulnerability? And I'm thinking here staff training and culture and governance, you know, so with a bit of hindsight, what could have helped them out a bit more?
Absolutely spot on. So the cases we've seen, you know, what they show is that resilience has nothing to do with the size of the organization or the wealth of the organization. It is about the governance piece, as you said. So the questions we need to ask is who owns the risk, who makes the decisions, who communicates, but also who learns from all that. And often incidents can reveal that fragmented responsibility and the lack of rehearsal organizations might have. So the strongest organization practice, you know, it could be up for failure at any point. So it's how we create that kind of hierarchy and the response that if your instinct says the phone call I'm receiving possibly is not genuine, can I put the phone down? Can I go ask a colleague? Or, as you said earlier, my gosh, it's my boss, I've got to respond to this urgently, you know, and we don't have the time to think, take a step back, delay the response 5 minutes because we need to ensure that that phone call received is not a scam. So there's a lot of lessons learned, but everything starts at the boardroom, and that responsibility and accountability aspect as well.
Definitely. And, you know, we live in this society now, don't you? When you think about consumer demand, we're so driven to excel at customer service, or we want something straight away. And actually, you point out there, maybe just take a step back and do you need it right now? Does that person really need it right now? And just take the time to breathe a bit and ask the question. And I guess the other challenge is if you know, you talk about the boardroom, and then the issue there becomes, what if that board doesn't really understand the necessity for cyber resilience and defense? So there's training there, isn't it? And that training has got to be at that level, because then that's got to filter down, hasn't it? And that's got to be rolled out across the organization.
Absolutely. And the government, the Department for Science, Innovation, Technology, especially, where cyber sits with them, they have published so much guidance and frameworks around the code of practice for directors, for organizations. Because, and you said it earlier as well, you know, it's many organizations will say, who's responsible for your cybersecurity? Oh, it's Bob down in the IT department. You know, it's a common phrase we hear all the time. But how have we trained the front desk staff, for example? How we trained the directors of the organization to understand, because cyber resilience means for every person within the company will be a different thing. Someone will deal with the technical aspects, someone's going to deal with the front desk risk, someone's going to deal with another risk, and we don't do that very well. We don't apply that risk assessment across every department within every organization.
And it's you've just made me think of something here. It's communication as well. It's open communication. So I very much deal in the world of website design and development. So for me to have an HTTPS security certificate is just a thing. I just, you know, I don't even question it. And I had an incident quite a few years ago now, but the purchasing person, literally sitting a few desks from me, went online and bought something with the company credit card, and it didn't have a security certificate. So basically the credit card got rinsed and all the company money taken that they got back. And I said, why didn't you just ask me the question, you know, because I would have said, don't buy from that website. So it's all about communication, isn't it? If you're unsure, just shout out, you know, because there will be somebody that will have the advice for you.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the main thing we don't do very well, because all the advice around spotting a scam, whatever that scam is slowing down your decision making. That's the first step. But every workplace has created a very urgent environment. So from one point of view, we give the advice, slow down, think, then respond or seek advice. But then all the other aspects of the organization is deliver the email in 5 minutes, do this report because it's urgent. So, you know, those two things don't align very well.
And in terms of, if we go to a big cyber attack last year to Jaguar Land Rover, I'm thinking, how kind of catastrophic was that? And I'm thinking in terms of the business itself, productivity, profitability, how disruptive it was to consumers, but also the supply chain, the SME supply chain, and ultimately a major sort of negative contribution to the UK economy. Just how bad was it?
I think it was absolutely massive, and we've seen JLR, we've seen Marks and Spencers. I heard from the co-op director only last week, and where he shared his experience of the cyber attack they faced. So when large manufacturers especially are being hit, the impact multiplies. It's not just them. So the factories will stop, the suppliers will lose the revenue, the logistics are disrupted, and of course the customers are affected as well. So the economic cost will go far beyond the company. It will affect the employment, it will affect the exports, and most importantly, that regional growth that we want to see. And that's why, again, cyber is becoming an economic policy issue. So as I said before you invest in a new technology and ensure your systems are secure, and then you start deciding which technology you want to use.
Yeah, definitely. And this kind of moves me on to, so obviously the likes of JLR, that's a huge organisation. And my concern is that many SMEs, small to medium sized enterprises, and they make up 99.9% of the UK economy. Well, they may look at these high profile cyber attacks in the media and assume cybercrime only affects companies like JLR or Marks and Spencers. But actually, how serious is the threat to SMEs? And do you have any data or evidence that illustrates the scale of the danger that they face?
I think it's a reality check, and this is the message we're trying to push. If we read the sector analysis that the government is producing every year, you can really see the breakdown of the sectors that are mostly hit are the SMEs, because they are part of that supply chain and they don't have the infrastructure to recover if they face a cyber attack, or if a large organization has faced a cyber attack, and how they can recover from that. So they can face those structural disadvantages, really, because they lack the in-house specialists very often. They rely on those third parties or an MSP or something. They will operate on tight margins. We know that as a fact. And many SMEs go with the assumption that they are too small to be targeted, which is exactly why they're so attractive. And we're trying to, in quotes, teach them that they are part of the supply chain. So for some SMEs, recovery is quite impossible, really. And that's why prevention matters so much. And next week, we've got the Cybersecurity Summit, the first Cybersecurity Summit in the Midlands. And one of our keynote speakers was an SME that faced a cyber attack, and that caused his whole company to go bankrupt because they could not recover from that. Yeah. So we're hoping, that would be a very good lesson learned, really, hearing firsthand from someone who has faced it and the impact it has on their business.
Yeah, brilliant. And actually, you can plug that. So where is that next week exactly?
It's here in Leicester. It's being hosted at De Montfort University at the venue. Yeah. So if you go on our website, we are massively oversubscribed, but there's a waiting list. We've got representatives from the government. We've got regional businesses. It's an all-day summit to talk exactly about those things we're discussing today in this podcast.
That's brilliant. Perfect. And in fact, actually, I'm sure you'll go into this next week, but what kind of practical advice would you give SMEs? My personal take on this is that SMEs are heavily targeted because I think it's known that they may be fragile and not well equipped to deal with this stuff. So in terms of that, they're a huge target, and quite often they're not the target specifically, but it might be a gateway in to get to other places, So what can SMEs do? Like simple steps. I'm thinking like Absolutely. Cyber essentials and in-house training. What would you advise?
Start with the basics. That's where everybody needs to start. So get cyber essentials is your first step. Then is use MFA, and then back up properly. Because what we see very often is you'll hear from an organization say, "Oh, now on the cloud." and they don't realize that even the cloud is someone's server sitting somewhere. So you still need to back it up. You need to make sure that your data is secure. Training the staff is very important. It's what we were saying earlier. Understand the nature of your organization and start understanding the risks that every department or every person within your organization could face that could lead to a cyber attack. So it's not one training for every member of staff. It's one size fits all. It's very important that we embed that ownership within the business, and someone must be responsible to maintain that momentum going. And often what businesses don't do, and I advise them quite heavily on that, is plan for an incident. You might think it will not happen to you, but what if? And as you said, we are part of the supply chain. Through us, they could try to get to someone else. So plan for any incidents and test recovery as well. And there's a lot of support out there that organizations can look for. Impartial advice is not about the tools, it's about the checklist, and Cyber Essentials is a very, very good start, where it's not a tick box, but it's a list. Have I done this? Have I done this? And they can start from there.
Totally. And a couple of things there. I got Cyber Essentials for a company back in 2017, and I mean, the timing of it, as you can imagine, but it's quite, there's guidance out there to do it, and we did a complete overhaul. We got remote tested, so a pretend attack to figure out all the weaknesses and everything. The websites were overhauled, the infrastructure, the hardware, the software. It was a big project, but actually just the uncanniness of it, just a couple of months after I got Cyber Essentials, the WannaCry attack happened. And it just proved my point. What I was seeing back in 2016 with digital naivety from a marketing team, and then I could see that this global attack was likely, but then I was in a new job where I didn't have the red tape. I could get Cyber Essentials, and it just proved dividends that when that WannaCry attack and how crippling it was, to the NHS as well, massively. So it's well worth doing. And I agree, it's about preventative, not reactive. It is like, what if this happens, what will we do? Or would you rather sleep better at night knowing that you've done everything that you can? But I guess the challenge there is that, how do you educate SME directors about this need? Because they may not even be aware of it being an issue. That's surely got to be a challenge, isn't it?
It is, and it remains a challenge. But I think, and this is where with my cluster hat on, I come in and we try to replicate this in other regions as well. Is it needs a combined approach across the industry, the government, education sector. It's about everyone coming together and creating that pathway that they need to follow and say, I need to start here because these are my risks and this is where I need to get to in so many years. And we try to kind of, businesses need to understand that it is to their benefit to understand that cyber security, cyber resilience is their business continuity. And they do underestimate that quite a lot, and they don't make it as part of their plans and when they set up their strategy, for example. So we need to recognize, and again, it's part of the messaging that we're pushing out, that digital failure is now the biggest threat, really. And that continuity must include that data recovery, communication, and decision making. There's still a lot to do, especially because technology is advancing. But equally, I think that the government especially is recognizing the needs, and they are creating those frameworks that can give us a starting point, and we can gradually convince in a way, and create, do more about that awareness piece as well.
Yeah, and it keeps coming back to education and awareness, doesn't it? Yeah, and in fact, you've touched on the next question there, because the question is, how important is adding cybersecurity and defence to a business continuity plan? And you've said it's massively important, but I think again it's the awareness of why that should be done. Like you can think about a factory being flooded or set on fire. Well, a cyber attack is as destructive, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's about that concept. And actually, you're right. I think people use apps and everything all the time, and they don't think about the vulnerability of that cloud being on a server somewhere.
Mm.
And we saw that last year, didn't we? We saw AWS go down and Cloudflare go down, and
Yeah.
everybody is so reliant on these just two big cloud
Correct.
service providers, and when they go,
Yeah.
and there's a discussion to be had there. Should that be allowed to happen? Should that kind of environment be segmented and separated and stuff like that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge subject, this, isn't it? It's an
Absolutely.
exciting one. But I want to move on. We've talked a lot about sort of the impact on businesses and what have you, but I want to go a bit here into the human element of
Mm.
cyber attacks. So I mentioned the WannaCry attack, and something back then that I heard on the radio that made me realise this is real. This is threatening stuff. There was an NHS patient who came on the radio, and she had cancer and she had to have chemotherapy. Well, because that attack had wiped out all of her data,
Mm.
it was a struggle for her to get the chemotherapy that she needed. And some stark words from her were that every day she goes without treatment is another nail in her coffin. And
Yeah.
that's when I really understood the human cost that this stuff can bring. It can be life threatening, can't it?
Yeah.
So my question to you on that is exactly how kind of significant and substantial is the human cost of cybercrime?
It's absolutely massive, and depends which sides of the cyber attack you're sitting. So if you're a victim, then you will feel violated, you'll feel ashamed and anxious, and we see it on the news very often when they do those case studies, and they interview the victims who fallen for a fraud text or something. So, and then if you are a business, you will suffer the stress, you will suffer the reputational damage, and of course the burnout as well, because if you are facing a cyber attack, it's a 24/7 job to recover from it. So there is no break. So these impacts will last long after the systems are restored, because if you faced it as an individual, because you were the one who picked up the phone and gave out the passwords, because you thought it was your line manager or someone, you feel very responsible. You were deceived, and you put your whole company into danger. And then as a business, how do you recover from your reputational damage? So it is absolutely severe, the emotional impact of cybercrime and what it can have as a
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's such a huge subject. But with my marketing hat on, you talk about reputational damage. Well, that's brand damage, isn't it? And brand reputation, and sales suffer and profits suffer. And also think about the psychological stress. I mean, imagine being a director, and this has happened, and all these jobs are going to be lost. And then that impact. So there's a massive. The human cost is huge, isn't it? And it's a massive holistic picture as to how devastating that is. Yeah, definitely. Good stuff. So looking at cybercrime in the year 2025 compared to the year before, 2024, what was the rise of it last year compared to the year before?
I think the data we collect grows quite rapidly. There's been huge investments in AI, so that technology is amplifying both the capability and the risk when it comes to cyber. So it is a crime that continues to rise, really, and the fraud and the ransomware is what really dominates. And then how we report all the incidents, it still lags in reality, and because of that, that's obviously such an increase of cybercrime, really.
Yeah, definitely. And that's looking set to continue, isn't it? I should imagine it's not going to it's going to carry on escalating as it does,
Yeah.
and it feels it's always a bit cops and robbers, isn't it? It's like as this technology advances, we're always trying to play catch up and keep up with it. So, I mean, a question actually is, how much is AI, and we've touched on this a bit, how much is AI shaping the evolution of cyber attacks? And again, what can businesses realistically do to keep up with this pace of change? Because AI is a new subject now, isn't it? And
Yeah.
that's coming in. So again, there's a lot of awareness to be had.
And I think in this podcast today, we've been talking until now about how bad AI could be, and how it can, amplify the risk and the capability of a system. And but although it lowers the barriers for the attackers, I think we really need to focus on how it can help the defenders to scale up what they do. So there's a lot of good things about technologies like AI. It doesn't replace responsibility. I think we need to make that very, very clear. The responsibility still needs to stay with that human. But as a technology, it can really, really help the defender side of the organization to scale up how they monitor the traffic on a website or on a software, on a system, and be ready before they face the cyber attack.
Yeah, brilliant. And something that's popped into my head, I think it's definitely a good idea to kind of look at the other perspective about the positive stuff of this, because it's not all doomsaying, is it? I mean, we can apply this technology and in a really productive way to strengthen our defense systems. But yes, you're right, it does always come back to the human. I mean, something that's popped into my head here is, because you're an academic, and I always think, when I think about career advice for anybody really, I think cyber defense and resilience is a really good subject to get into. So my younger nephew is at Loughborough College at the minute, and he's doing IT and business. And I say to him quite often, you really want to think about cyber security, because it's a rewarding job, but also I should imagine it's going to be more and more in high demand, isn't it? And you can play a part in this career in national defence, and that kind of stuff. So, what are your thoughts on that, about that as a career?
It absolutely is. And I think if you ask 10 of us as academics what we do in cybersecurity, each one of us will tell you something completely different, because it's such a vast discipline. There is space for everyone, really. And the beauty of it is, for me to do what I do, because as I said, I do have the technical background, but if I don't collaborate with people from psychology, if I don't collaborate with people from the education side, then I can't do my job right, because I need to understand the perspectives of those other disciplines. So when I develop, let's say, a technical solution, or I deliver a training session on cybersecurity, I need other perspectives in it as well. So cybersecurity is such a huge discipline. Now, I don't think we've explored all its possibilities yet.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and again, that actually comes beautifully back to EDI, doesn't it? Because diverse team structures and all the different pockets of expertise within it, and then coming together. Yeah, so it's exciting stuff. And I guess as a career as well, I mean, you could find yourself working public sector, civil service, academia, big institutions, small SME. The scope of it is absolutely huge, isn't it? So yeah, definitely. So I think I've got a last question for you, and this is a bit of a closing one, and it's a human one again. So what human traits do you think AI and digital disruption will never replace?
That's an excellent question. I would say judgment, empathy, ethics and bias, I'll put them together, and the leadership aspect. I think those will always remain human. Technology can support us, it will not replace us. That's how I see things.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Ismini, thank you so much for today. Thank you for your time, your knowledge, your thought sharing, and your wisdom, and good advice. So if you just want to let people know where they can find the cluster online, so they can check you out for themselves.
So we are at emcsc.co.uk, and you can also find us on LinkedIn as well. East Midlands Cybersecurity Cluster. We update with our news very regularly. You can get involved. We run a variety of projects, and we're always here to seek collaborations and see how we can support our region even more.
Perfect. Ismini, thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.